Poetry isn't usually an art form we associate with video games, but on rare occasion, a developer will come along and create a title that taps into those various energies, poetic elements that stand as a testament to why games can achieve a certain degree of art. Folklore is one such game that summons up a significant amount of poetic elegance, while maintaining a reasonable, fun gameplay mechanic that'll please a lot of adventure gamers. And while this relatively unknown title has quite a few flaws to speak of, which we'll get to soon, it should certainly satisfy any eagerly awaiting gamer ready to plunge headfirst into the netherworld. Folklore, developed by Game Republic, follows the extremely surreal journeys of Ellen, a young woman with a bitter past, and Keats, an overly sarcastic journalist always looking for a good story. These two strangers meet in the town of Doolin under different circumstances, but ultimately have the same goal: unravel the mystery that haunts this small community and traverse the realms of the dead in search of their missing pasts. Many of you may be under the impression that this is just a straight RPG with some adventure elements on the side, but that's definitely not the case. Folklore is much more of an action-adventure game with RPG undertones. However, that somewhat convoluted label only applies to the actual battle system. Everything else is very difficult to classify, but if you had to, just consider Folklore to be a fantastical mystery novel comic book. I'd say that's the best way to put it. I'm also confident that that term requires some clarification. Folklore is divided rather sharply into two different modes: storytelling and battle. The combat system has received a lot of attention before, so we'll get to that in a moment. But Folklore's various methods of storytelling really make for an interesting experience. The game has about 4 different ways to tell its story to you, so the diversity in this presentation definitely keeps you hooked. First, you have your standard CG cutscenes, which are impressively done. Then you have your in-game cutscenes, which are equally pleasing to the eye. And of course, no RPG-esque game could be without the traditional dialogue scheme, so there's that too, displaying 2 character models on the screen and having dialogue bubbles pop up between them. The surprising addition to this lineup of styles is the comic book presentation. When the narrative plays out in this mode, the game actually displays the 3D character models in poses, caught stylistically in a frame-by-frame sequence to simulate the tone of a comic book. While you may be a little turned off by this odd approach at first, it'll likely grow on you and become one of the most vivid and effective methods of conveying exposition. The game balances storytelling with battle by alternating between the real world and the numerous realms of the netherworld. When in the real world, you take control of either Ellen or Keats, and you try and solve the murder mysteries that plague the town and are throwing the residents into a somber sort of anguish. When you travel to the netherworld, however, you're given more control of your character, and you're charged with besting folks, netherworld spirit creatures, in combat, ultimately leading up to a massive battle with the realm's folklore, or in other words, the big baddie of the level. When in the netherworld, you can move around, lock on enemies, dodge, all the normal pleasantries of adventure gameplay. The main difference in Folklore is the usage of the face buttons, which can each be assigned to a particular folk that you have fought and defeated in battle. After defeating them, you can absorb their soul, or id, through the usage of the 6-axis motion control and minigames. And you can employ their abilities in combat for the remainder of the game. You have them for the whole thing. With a wide host of different folk, each with different abilities, strengths, weaknesses, the battle engine can be quite intriguing. It's all about finding the right combination of folk powers and using the hints encrypted in the incredibly charming Netherworld picture books in order to survive the trials of the spiritual world. In the grand scheme of things, this game plays smoothly and it looks absolutely beautiful, almost mesmerizing. Not because the graphics are particularly astounding, they don't necessarily push the system to its limits. Instead, the art direction and the execution of the game's visual elements are precise and ethereal. Folklore becomes a truly haunting and hypnotic design. Just walking through a field of flower petals or roaming the streets of strife-worn Warcadia will prove to you that this game has above-average imagery. Unfortunately, Folklore isn't perfect. Although it's interesting to play the game from 2 different perspectives, the journeys of Ellen and Keats are startlingly similar, and thus can grow very repetitive when you have to constantly switch back and forth between their exploits. And when it comes to the actual combat system, remapping your folk powers is seriously flawed. Bringing up the menu is easy enough, and so is assigning them to a button, but as soon as you complete the changes and you exit out of the menu, there's this tremendously awkward pause every time. Since this is a game revolving around quick thinking and switching powers often and on the fly, it's strange that this issue wasn't addressed. These concerns, while certainly noticeable, shouldn't deter you from giving Folklore a try. It's an incredible game, one of the best for the system, and its undeniable eccentricity will keep you riveted. Its raw beauty is unmistakable, and it's actually worth taking a slow walk through some of the in-game environments just to marvel at the majestic splendor inherent in the title's finest details. PS3 owners, this is definitely a title to check out. Whether you're into adventure games, RPGs, definitely give it a shot. It's one of the best to come out on the system thus far.